All right. Good morning, everyone. Want to welcome you all to our CaribNOG ARIN CaribNOG webinar series, looking on the impact of COVID-19 on our internet infrastructure and our technology infrastructure during this period. This webinar series has been tracking just the issues concerning security, working from home, resiliency on the internet infrastructure as we go through this period. And today we're going to continue the conversation, looking specifically at the issues of network autonomy and how we get to more autonomous networks, get to more control of our future through the use of autonomous systems and IPv6 deployment. So this is something that we've touched on CaribNOG before, but this gives us a really great opportunity, speaking directly, and I'll introduce them shortly, directly with representatives from our regional registries who are responsible and help us to get these autonomous systems deployed. So today gives us a good opportunity to delve into it, and will serve those who are interested and want to move forward in this area. Just to give, my name is Stephen Lee, one of the program coordinators at CaribNOG. And just to give a brief overview of the structure of today, we'll have two presentations, 10 minutes long. And our presenters will basically give us an overview of the issues relating to autonomy and network resiliency, and touch on some specific things. And then we'll have a 15-minute Q&A session in which we can follow up questions or treat with anything that came out of the short talk. We will do that for the first half of the hour, and then the second presentation in the second half of the hour, and before we wrap up at the top of the hour, 12, we'll be able to just have an open floor discussion and touch on those issues. Our webinar closes at 12, and for half an hour after that, we do invite you to stay on and have a more informal lunch session with our panelists. So let me go straight into introducing. We have John Worley from ARIN, that's the American Registry for Internet Numbers. John is no stranger to CaribNOG. He has presented in CaribNOG a number of times over the last few years, and many of us know John, and he knows quite a few of us from the ARIN Caribbean series that he and the exec director of CaribNOG, Bevel Wooden, would have been stewarding for 2+ years now. John is a member of the Registry Services Department at ARIN, and therefore he's responsible for IPv4, IPv6, and autonomous system number registrations. And for anybody that seems very theoretical, and what does that mean, John is going to explain those things to us. Help desk operations, who is, and so on. John is like a perfect candidate to talk to us about this, because he is very aware of the landscape in the Caribbean, has been helping operators and organizations in the Caribbean region to get their number resources. So I'm really glad to have you on, John, and welcome you to this CaribNOG webinar series. Also up, we have Alejandro Acosta, who actually is returning for a second week in a row. He's a part of the R&D department at LACNIC, that's the Latin American and Caribbean Network Information Center. Alejandro is also very familiar with issues in the Caribbean region, and would be similarly positioned as John to talk about how to get and deploy number resources and IPv6 in particular. As I said, Alejandro was on last week, so he's up to bat again, and he's very, very comfortable inside of what we're doing. I want to keep this light and conversational, especially as we get into the Q&A session. We'll ask everybody to put your questions in the Q&A board that you have in Zoom. And as you put the questions in, we'll pull them out and we will direct them to our speakers. Use the question Q&A section as much as possible rather than the chat, if you will, please. But we'll generally interact around this and hope to have a really fruitful discussion today. So without going any further, I'm going to ask John to go up. He will share his slides and give us a nice 10-minute overview of the issues, and then we'll be able to ask him some questions and have dialogue. So welcome again, John, and morning.
Thank you, Stephen. Good morning, everybody. Can everybody see the slides okay? Good? Fantastic. Okay, so I'll just talk very briefly about, in particular, getting an AS number and IPv6 from ARIN. So this is a checklist we had adapted for use in our Caribbean activities to kind of make it, give you a simple pathway. And this is kind of, I've adapted this, and I really want to keep it very simple. I'm going to focus on the first two of these, getting an AS number, getting IPv6, 2 steps that'll help everybody become autonomous. And the good news is they are extraordinarily easy. So good stuff. So in terms of getting an AS number, this is obviously an AS number if you want to do BGP. If you're participating in an exchange point where you are, that automatically qualifies you. It's basically we have, if you guys recall, way back when we used to only have 2 bytes of AS numbers. So it was a limited space. That's the only reason why the AS number request process used to be kind of difficult. We only had 65,000 2-byte AS numbers. Now we've expanded to 4 byte. We got 4 billion. I was actually talking with my boss, John Sweeting, yesterday, and we said, there's no possible way we'll ever run out of 4-byte AS numbers. There's so darn many that really our only concern here is just to make sure you don't pay that $550 fee if you don't need to. So essentially everyone, we're working to make this basically a vending machine where you put in your 550 and out pops an AS number. Real brief history. The reason why in the past, if you've requested an AS number from ARIN, the process used to be a lot more rigorous. And the reason why is that getting IPv4 addresses from ARIN used to be tied to multi-homing. That's the reason why in the past, if you've requested an AS number from ARIN, somebody might have said, hey, send me your contract with your providers, provide this and that. The only reason we did that is because it used to be tied to v4, and so people would get an AS number just to get v4. They had no need for an actual AS number. So interestingly, as a registry, once you sort of train your analysts to say, okay, be very rigorous on this ASN request process, turns out it's very difficult to unring that bell. So what we've actually been doing is just working on making it as easy as possible so that we were talking yesterday and we said this process really is just you put in a request and you get your AS number. So this is basically all you need to do is just tell us you'll be peering with an exchange point, providers. You can basically qualify. Everyone qualifies. Let me put it that way. Again, really the only thing we want to do is there's been a historical perception that I need to get an AS number from my RAR, my regional registry, before I can do anything else. That's not correct. That being said, the focus of this presentation is on autonomy, is on sort of resiliency, hardening networks within the Caribbean. So this is a great thing where I think most locations now have an exchange point, I believe. I know there's been a lot of work done in that area. So suffice it to say, really this is just everyone can qualify. You can feel free to contact me. My email address is jonw@arin.net. If for any reason you didn't do an AS number and you have gotten anything other than an approval, please contact me. This is very easy. Everyone qualifies. So enough said on that. Should be a very easy process. So let's talk about V6. V6 it's a little bit of a game in terms of what's easier, getting an AS number or getting V6. This is intended to be AS numbers, and V6 are essentially point-click-ship operations within ARIN. You can see as a service provider, just look at that middle one. Provide a plan which details at least 50 assignments made within 5 years. It's virtually impossible not to meet that. In fact, I challenge people to not be able to meet that. it is virtually impossible unless you are, I don't know, in Antarctica or someplace where there are not 50 people within, you know, traveling distance. Everyone qualifies. So, you know, the point there is don't worry about qualifying for V6. You're already qualified, okay? Again, my role in the organization is I've sort of crafted a little bit of a role in terms of being Bevel's +1, I suppose you could say. This is intended to be very easy. So I'm not going to go into sort of, look at that middle one. If you say, I'm going to make an assignment to 50 users within 5 years, you qualify, done. The only, the real, let me actually, I'll save that for a second. I want to talk about block sizes for IPv6, but I'll hold that for just a second. V6 for end users. Again, this is, if you look at the first one there, if you look at have an IPv4 assignment from ARIN, so it turns out the way the policies have changed, everybody qualifies for V4. Now, I'm going to put an asterisk in that because it's, well, we don't have any. Everyone qualifies, but we don't have any. So the policies have changed so that both end users and service providers, if you put in any of these requests, an AS number, IPv6 as a service provider or IPv6 as an end user, everyone qualifies. I'm just going to put it out there, as simple as that. There are technical caveats, but we will find a way to qualify anyone who wants V6 or an AS number. Now what I want to do is take just a second. Our focus now in V6 is on making sure folks get the largest block size they're entitled to. We found historically that's the big problem, is people get V6 and they come back in a year or two and say, I got a block that was just way too small. I had no idea. Once I started deploying it, I found out I needed a much bigger block. That's where our focus is right now, is on making sure folks know what they're entitled to in terms of V6 and to make sure they get it. You know, I'm not going to force you to take the maximum block size you're entitled to, but that's really what we're trying to do, is to push people in that direction. To that end, we've been doing some IPv6 address planning webinars. I've actually been hosting them. It's been really great. I think we had almost 150 people for one of them to talk about how to figure out what block size you need. So I would encourage everybody, getting a V6, very easy. Determining what block size you need is a lot more, I don't want to say difficult, but that's where the work is in V6. So I'd encourage you, if you would like to get V6 and you've heard, you know, John said everyone gets it, awesome. If you want to learn how to determine what block size you need, I would encourage you to check out one of those webinars. I was looking on our website. I don't think it's, I know we have a recorded version of one of those webinars that kind of goes into what block size you need and how you determine that. I believe that's, if it's not on the website, it should be soon. So I'd be happy to provide anybody, if you're interested in what block size do I need in V6? How do I determine that? How do I sort of start planning my address plan? That's really where our work is focused now. I'd be happy to help anybody. If you have any questions about, gosh, what block size do I need? Either in Q&A, anything like that, I'd be happy to answer those. That's really what we're focusing our energy on. So we can make sure that when you get a V6 block, instead of 2 years later, oops, this is useless to me, way too small, that you get it, and then when you're ready to deploy, it's the exact right size for the lifetime of your network. So with that said, you know, I hope that lays out a little bit. I'm trying to keep things brief. Be happy to take any questions, comments, concerns, anything anybody would like to discuss.
Great, thank you, John. And as John just said, any questions or so, let's start to queue them up. John, I'll just get the ball rolling with that. You indicated that the desire right now is to make acquisition of ASNs super easy for everyone, and everyone qualifies. So could you just spell out the context in which somebody would be using an ASN? When you said it, Adam, just a thought there that clear qualifies for an ASN. I was going to suggest that she goes and get one. But what's the context in which people would be getting these ASNs to make their networks resilient? I guess I'm asking you to spell out what their autonomous system is.
Sure. So the number one use case, I suppose, would be joining an exchange point, right? And that's the focus of, we sort of historically, I'm sure folks know, you're on an island and all of a sudden your data is going to Puerto Rico or it's going to Miami or what have you. So a big focus of our resiliency, network hardening, autonomy is to make sure that your data stays where it is, right? That rather than having to make this ludicrous trip to somewhere else. So that's a big part of it. If you have an exchange point, getting an AS number just allows you to participate in that exchange point, allows you to talk to everybody else, to peer, so that a local data stays local. So that's a big one. If you're participating in an exchange point, that's all you have to say. I'm participating in this exchange point, there you go. That's all you have to say. The other would be if you're going to multi-home with more than one provider. You want to do BGP, you want to bring in 2 or more providers and use the same IP addresses through them. That'd be other classic case. It's a little bit different in the Caribbean because there's, unfortunately, less choice of providers sometimes, less number of providers. That's why in this region, I would say the exchange point's number 1, multi-homing's probably number 2. And what the AS number is really, it puts your network on the map, right? It's just AS 701's Verizon Business. AS, I don't know, 64752, that's you. Now you are on that level of, being a network that has its own routing policy. So that's essentially what it is you're now stepping out of that bigger world. Instead of taking your provider's default, now you're, I don't know, in control of your own destiny, as it were. So it's kind of the use case, but I would say, so either an exchange point, multi-homing, those are the classic examples. And again, our focus really is just, we'll give everybody one. We just don't want you to pay $550 if you don't need one. But if you're doing any of those things, we will deliver you that AS number, toot sweet.
Okay, great.
John, I have a question. But first, a comment. You said that the ASN number more or less puts you on the map. And what I am understanding is that in order to be on an internet exchange, you need to have an ASN number. In the Caribbean, we don't really have many internet exchanges yet. So maybe that might be part of the reason that it is difficult to push the ASN numbers. The question, therefore, is, we've been talking about IPv6 for probably the last 10 years. And saying since then, the first time I heard it, I was very excited and thinking, oh, this is something we should be doing. But here it is, we're now out of IPv4 resources, but still we have to be begging people to get IPv6. I don't know if this is a reasonable question, but why do you think this is such a hard sell? What more do we have or should we be doing to get organizations to move to IPv6?
Sure. So, and it's interesting. You've said that, and we've reached v4 depletion, but we have an IPv4 waiting list. There may be people in the room who've gotten space through the IPv4 waiting list. We have other ways of getting IPv4. So you're right. It's interesting. There's an interesting dynamic wherein there's just people like what's familiar, and I don't know if easy is the right word, but people, and it's particularly when we talk about, I think what you said is 100% accurate. Think about after this whole COVID-19 thing. I think people are going to be even less apt to start embracing new things. It's probably going to be more of a, let's just get all our existing ducks in a row. So I think it is, to me, I don't think that we push v6 as anything other than it's another protocol. So if you want to become, you want to get on the map, as it were, you need to be able to have an AS number, to have v4, to have v6. So I suppose to me, it is not so much about pushing v6 as it is, this is a part of what you need to do to become autonomous. So that's where I say is, it's not about v6 being some sort of magical solution. It's about it being another tool in your kit. That's what I would say is it's difficult to say to people, v6 is something you must do. You must train everybody. You must learn all these new things. I feel that the approach, and there could be some disagreement, is to sort of slide it in there to say, here's your AS number, your v4. Here's some v6 as well. We focused on making it, there's talk about the fee schedule constantly. How can we lower the fees to get v6? I think to me, the first step is just getting it to people. it's, you know, it's a problem where I think when we look back, at some point, we'll look back and say V6 is ubiquitous. Now, when will that happen? It's hard to say. In terms of what we can do as a registry, what we can do is make it as easy as possible, as cheap as possible. And we've been doing a lot of webinars to familiarize people with, I think that helps a lot. I think honestly, these webinars we've done, people have felt, it helps to have somebody, a face-to-face type of thing. V6 can be sort of difficult, but I think what we found is webinars, things that are interactive, that's really the way. Instead of, we used to do a lot of throwing information out at people. Hey, here's V6 information, and somehow magically that would transform into people using it. To me, it's I think a helping hand is what's needed to say it's not that difficult. You can get it, it's doable. And what we found, I've found our webinars on IPv6 addressing to be extremely useful. And so I think that's, to me, is people know about it, and I think in particular, spending the time to help people understand it, that's really, to me, instead of just an incessant person screaming into a megaphone, V6, 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 is for people to say, hey, you want to do V6? I'm going to help you do that. Mm-hmm. To sort of spread that in, I don't know, kind of a fashion that the more knowledge people have, so that to me is how it's not going to be we always get people calling our help desk saying, where's V6? When is it going to be, when is V6 going to be ready? You know, to me, it's going to spread, and at some point, that's important. What to me is important is the face-to-face helping. That we found more than anything. It makes people, when you just say do V6, it's like this sounds silly. I feel like I'm on an island. I don't know what it is. What is this V6? What am I doing? When someone's helping you, to me, that's where it becomes different. Is okay, now I see. Now I can do it. So I think a lot of hand-holding really helps. That's what I've found is that, you know, so I hope that makes sense.
Yep. Perfect, John. I think Bevel has his hand up as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what John is saying there, because to Claire's point and to Claire's question, one of the issues is understanding the importance of network autonomy. It actually has nothing to do with IXPs and so on. It has to do with first understanding the critical value of having an autonomous network and maintaining degrees of redundancy and resilience in your network architecture. Having an ASN, an autonomous system number, having IPv6, your own number block independent of an ISP or internet service provider, is all part of the toolkit in terms of building out autonomous networks. Now, we can say that, as John said, but it's a lot better, it is heard a lot clearer when we can see that. And there's some really interesting examples across the region of, for example, IPv6 deployment in Grenada. Brent McIntosh, who is one of the panelists here today, has done some really interesting things in terms of deploying networks. When people see deployments in networks similar to their own or in environments similar to their own, it makes it a lot easier for them to understand, okay, this is how this applies to me, or this is how I can go about configuring or customizing this to my network. And so these stories, these sharings of experiences become as important to ASN deployment and IPv6 deployment as understanding the core technology and the engineering behind it, the theory of it. And I think to amplify what John has been trying to put his finger on, the more we share the experiences, the better we all are in terms of understanding what our individual tailored, customized, or local approaches can be.
Yeah, in advertising, it's called the bandwagon effect. The more people who are doing it that you can see, the more you become incentivized to do it yourself. So Bevel, I think you're exactly right, which is the more people see other people, peers, not in the networking sense, but you know, other networks that are similar to them, I can do it too. So I think it's very important. That's another thing we focus on, is building case studies to sort of show it's not that hard. Here's how somebody else did it, you can do it too.
Right. Thanks, Bevel. Thanks, John. Jerry George just made a comment that I did the IPv6 webinar and it was extremely useful in understanding the difference with v4 and requirements for implementation. So Jerry is highly recommended.
Jerry. We're actually going to start working on our second IPv6 webinar. So I'm really glad you enjoyed it. I really love doing those. It's really fun. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
All right, great. Just one quick question. Well, do we have time? I want to take Steve's question. Is there any benefit, and John, if you can just answer this really quickly, if there's any good benefit for a small organization like a high school who has 2 providers to get an ASN?
Yeah, it's, what is the benefit? Hardening your network. What that means is if one of your providers goes down, you automatically, you fail over to the other one. So yes, I actually think there is, and I don't know that size matters. Not to quote Yoda, but it really doesn't matter what your size is. Educating the youth is a very important mission. So I would say, yeah, absolutely, there's benefit. Now, is it as great as, I don't know, a giant data center? I think there's definite value there.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, great. Thanks, John. We will now move on to our second half, and this will be a presentation from Alejandro Acosta at LACNIC. So let's get Alejandro up, and just to remind, before we finish the hour, we will have we'll be able to have just a general open forum to catch any questions that weren't done after the presentations. And at the top of the hour, we will move into a more informal structure, lunch with the speakers, and it's more like an ask me anything type of forum, and we'll be able to talk a little bit more about some of these things. So Alejandro.
Yes, hello, Stephen. How are you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Great. Thanks.
Okay, good for that. Well, I'm very happy of being with you for a second week in a row. It is exciting, actually. I really enjoy CaribNOG meetings. Well, I will try to somehow mix my presentation with the one given by John, our colleague in ARIN. So I can somehow go more or less fast with those slides, since part of them were covered by John. We're talking about autonomy. Actually, I check what autonomy means. And if you look for it in internet, it will say something like, it is about self-governance. So it means like you will manage, you will fully manage your resources. So my question to you is, what resources are we talking about? And of course, we are talking about internet resources, such as IPv4, IPv6 addresses, and ASN. I will describe what autonomous system and what autonomous system number means in case you are not fully aware of that. An autonomous system is a collection of connected internet protocols routing prefixes. And many times when we talk about ASNs, we also are referring to ASN, with the autonomous system number. Every time ARIN or LACNIC or any RIR, we assign an autonomous system, we are actually assigning an autonomous system number. When you announce, when you publish, when you advertise your prefixes to the internet, your prefixes will be like match with a number. That number is autonomous system number. Every organization, at least major organization, every ISP, they have an autonomous system number, or probably even more than one. For example, if you talk about Google, Google will have their autonomous system number. Facebook, they will have their autonomous system number. Any big ISP in the Caribbean, like Flow, they have their own autonomous system number. Okay, this is important you to know this concept. And since we're talking about autonomy, I wanted to talk to you about private resources. I guess that all of you are aware of this. There is something that is called private IP addresses. I am completely sure that all of you have private IP addresses in your home, in your house, probably in your office. Private addresses are prefixes such as 198.168.1. 168.1.10. That is a private address. And there is a document which is called, let me use the laser, which is called the RFC 1918. It got one updated, which describes which addresses should be used for private internet. Okay, and this is something that is less known, but it is also popular. There is also private autonomous systems. Those are documented in the RFC 1930. There is a section 10 which explicitly mentions the reserved autonomous system numbers, and there is the range for the 16-bit autonomous system numbers. John already mentioned that there are two types of autonomous system, 16 bits and 32 bits. For the 16 bits, this is the numbers that we can use. I will explain something about this later. So talking about private IP addresses, it is documented in this document. I already said that. I wanted to let you know that the concept of private addresses is even older than that. It's not in February 1996. It is from March, it is in Spanish, from March 1994. Okay. However, in this very same document, the addresses appear there. In this slide, you can take a look at those addresses. I am completely sure that all of you are aware of this. However, not many people know why those ranges are in use. For example, you have that 10.0.0.0/8. This network was used a long time ago by ARPANET. And when we decided to use 10.0.0.0/8 for private usage, it was because at that time, the ARPANET network was being shut down. And Mr. John Postel, he considered a good idea to use this very same network for this. And the other two, this is like class A space, this is a class B space, this is a class C space. For the class B space, what they did at that time, they took 172.16 because it was the lowest space available, at least for class B. And was more or less the same with the class C network, which is 192.168/16, which was the lowest space available in the class C space, okay? It means that at the beginning, actually, John Postel was assigning public IP addresses to everybody. There was a time that they said, oh, you know what? We will need IP addresses that actually are not going to be connected to internet. So they decided to create this space. Just in case you are not fully sure about this, all resources that are assigned by RIRs, such as ARIN and LACNIC, are usable in internet. All of them are public or global. Global is the concept for the IPv6 public space, but at the end it's exactly the same. What else? Okay, I have a few information about this, and I am very happy that John talked how to request internet resources from ARIN. We talked more or less the same last week, LACNIC, and I want you to know why you should, in case you have not done that, why you should request your own resources. The first reason that I can tell you, you can easily, I will tell you why easily is between quotes, it is easy to change your upstream provider. Suppose you are this enterprise on the left and you are connected to ISP3, you just want to move. Maybe this ISP wants to charge a lot of money to you. Maybe the ISP is failing a lot, has a lot of outages, is slow, they do not give you support for whatever reason, and you want to move from this ISP to the other one. It is easy for you. Why? Because the resources, in case they are assigned by IRR, belongs to you. So you can say, you know what, ISP3, I don't want to work with you anymore. You talk with another ISP, and then you start announcing your prefix to them, And everything you have in here, firewalls, LAN switch, routers, your policies, your network address translation policies, everything will remain intact. You do not have to do much in here. So this is the reason why it is easy to move from one to other one. Maybe if you're an ISP, it is not that easy for whatever. Maybe you have to say to someone, hey, you know what? I'm going to move from one ISP to other one. There will be a small outages or whatever. But in general scenarios, it will be easy to change from upstream provider. Okay, another reason why you should have your own resources. Actually, John mentioned something about this. It is the optimal way for doing multi-homing. I am completely sure that you know some routers that in somehow they give you redundancy for the internet. Suppose you have two ISPs, and if one ISP fails, the device will automatically switch to the other ISP. Maybe they can do failover or whatever. However, if you have resources in here, suppose a web server, a mail server, or any other kind of infrastructure, and you change from one ISP to the other one, the incoming traffic will fail. But if you have BGP, the exactly same network will be announced to this ISP, to another ISP, and in case one of them fails, the traffic will be automatically rerouted by using BGP through the other ISP. And all your services, suppose the web server, the mail server, will remain up and running. Another important thing, your organization will appear in the internet ecosystem. This is something very important because suppose you do not have your own resources and you are using an upstream provider, an ISP, of course. If for some reason someone wants to contact you, want to see to whom belongs the IP you are using, from which autonomous system you are reaching Google, they will see the autonomous system of your ISP. You do not appear in the internet ecosystem. So this is important for you to appear if you, for example, want to organize meetings, for example, with CDN providers, content delivery network providers. You will need to say, you know what, this is my autonomous system. I am this person with these IP addresses. And that reason is connected with this one. When CDM, suppose Netflix, Google, Facebook, Akamai, Cloudflare, they measure traffic, and that is something that they do all the time. They are going to measure from your autonomous system. Google will say, you know what, from these autonomous systems, I am getting whatever, 10 gigs of bytes. And they will say, I want to connect with that network. I want to put a catch device. I want to create appearing traffic, appearing link with this autonomous system, because both of us, Google and you are going to save bandwidth, and you are going to give a better service to your customer, okay? And here I have two more reasons in only one slide. Maybe you are not fully aware of this, but at least in LACNIC, we have a policy called critical infrastructure. Suppose you are a CCTLD or an important IXP or something like that, you still can request resources from LACNIC if you are actually, if you are managing a critical infrastructure. And the other one is, if you want to connect with other organizations, the most convenient way is using your own resources, okay? Like your own IPv4 addresses, IPv6 addresses, and your own autonomous system. The autonomous system that you can see here is a private autonomous systems. They are valid, you can use them, but that is not the most convenient way, okay? And probably someone won't want to connect with you if you're actually using a private autonomous system. Okay, and that's all what I have. Stephen?
All right, thank you, Alejandro. That's really good, quick technical dive to complement John's overview. So that was perfect. Thank you. So wanted have a question here off the bat regarding these, what you just mentioned, is private autonomous systems. I must admit, I was a little bit surprised about, I think, is it RFC 1930 you had put up? 1930?
Yes, that is,
Yeah,
and there is
right.
an update, excuse me, Stephen, and there is an update when the 32 bits autonomous system space appeared. There are also private autonomous systems in that space.
Okay.
But anyhow, I just want you to know the concept.
Right. Okay. So, well, if you, I'm going to ask you to explain it a little bit more based on this question here. That what would be the purpose, or how do people use a private autonomous system? I mean, what's that about generally?
Sure. There are many reasons why you are going to use private autonomous systems. First, for example, in documentation, it's very popular to put private autonomous systems. If you check videos online about BGP and that kind of things, you will see that most of them are using private autonomous systems. And in the practical way, when you are going to use autonomous system is, for example, you are an ISP, you are developing, so for example, an MPLS network where you're doing some MPLS with MPBGP routing. It is very common to put private autonomous system to your customers. So your customers internally, they are going to announce, internally, you are not connecting with other organizations. Internally, they are going to announce their prefixes to you. Suppose you have many customers, and before announcing the space to the internet, what you are going to do is to remove private autonomous systems. It is a very simple command in any BGP session where you remove that. And well, that are the two main ideas that I can think when you can use private autonomous systems, but they are very popular.
Okay, good to know. I'm going to remind our attendees that anyone who has any questions for Alejandro and also John, you can start posting them in the Q&A section. There's a button at the bottom of your webinar screen. Another question for you, Alejandro, and John might want to jump in on this as well. When autonomous system numbers are supplied to organizations, say somebody who is peering at multiple internet exchange points, would the same AS number be used at every across all of the IXPs, or do we require a different AS at each IXP? And if it's the same autonomous system number across multiple IXs, how is the I guess the origination of the address spaces and all that, handled?
Okay, I will tell you my version, and I hope John probably can somehow mention something else. Unfortunately, there is not a unique response to that question. I have seen both scenarios. I have seen scenarios where the people uses one autonomous system for the full network. Imagine very big networks in all Latin America, in the US, in the Caribbean, in probably part of Europe, and all of them are using only one autonomous systems. And I have seen actually the other scenario where you have one autonomous system for some IPs in Latin America, for some IPs in the US, for some IPs in part of Europe, maybe in the Caribbean too. It depends on what you want to do. I will tell you something else. In case you are worried about Anycast scenario, you should not be worried. Anycast will be based fully in the prefix, not in the autonomous system. And that's it. I don't know if John wants to say something else.
I covered it.
We have a question here from Jerry George. Is there value in using a private ASN in a large internal network for internal use? For example, government or multi-site company with multiple ISP connections in different locations? Thanks, Jerry.
Yes, it is completely valid. Actually, I know about very big companies that are doing that, and it fully works. Some people actually what I'm going to tell you is not my suggestions, but this is something that I have seen and actually has been presented in a lot of LACNOG, NANOG meetings. Some people has even replaced an IGP network like OSPF, RIP, ISIS with internal BGP. And that is fully valid. And that is something that is going to work.
Okay, great. I don't know, do we have any other questions around the use of IPv6 and ASNs for resiliency? All right.
Hey, Steve.
No.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah,
sorry.
Brent. Sure.
I jumped in a little late. I just had one question, but maybe it will get touched on. I just wanted to get an idea on, best practices for, when you're multi-homing with IPv6 as opposed to v4, because, in terms of, it's important to have a specific hierarchy when you advertise an IPv6 address blocks, So maybe Alejandro or John could take a stab at, helping with this, because it's a question I get from a couple of the smaller ISPs. If you have a /32, you have two multi-home pairs, should you break this block? How should you break this block up? And how should you advertise your prefixes per link? So I hope I'm kind of clear enough on the question, but if not, I'll be happy to just give it some additional info.
Sure, I can take a stab at answering that. So I'll answer what I think you're asking. So it turns out in v6, what is nice is that really the smallest unit we assign to sites, a /48, is what you use to multi-home. So it's a little bit different. So when I think of v4, right, we used to have to think, well, if somebody wants to multi-home, if somebody wants to make this routable, they need at least a /24. So we had these policies that said, well, if you have an autonomous site, even if it doesn't need a /24 in terms of addresses, well, you can get a /24 for routing reasons. Turns out that because we have so much v6, you can get a /32 block that has 65,000 plus /48 blocks, each of which is really globally routable. We're still some on the infancy of v6 routing, but the good thing is that you don't really have to think about it. In other words, so we do these we've done these webinars, and people say, well, what about multi-home to v6 customers? Well, if you give everybody a /48, everybody can multi-home. So the blocks are large enough that you kind of get it almost for free, that instead of, it's almost like you can assign everybody in v4 a /24, right? It's, so I think it's important to do that, to have a nice structured addressing plan. But what's nice is, even if you give a site, let's suppose you have a backbone, you advertise a single /32 to everyone. Now you break it up into autonomous networks, they're all still at least a /48. So I think in some degree, you get it for free. That's what nice about v6 is that you don't really have to do the same v4 thinking. Well, is this site going to eventually be autonomous? Is it going to need to route its own prefix? Gosh, it needs a /24. Now you give it a /48, whether it needs to multi-home or not. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what, is that kind of what you're talking about?
Thank you very much, John. Okay, so hi guys, again, Brent McIntosh, the Grenada Internet Exchange. That was very helpful, John. And Alejandro, in just the last one, as it relates to us trying to maintain, and I'm not sure if that's an actual requirement, but I know we're trying to get away from having tons of prefixes in the global routing table and trying to maintain the size because, of course, the limitations on certain hardware. What are your thoughts on advertising the minimum requirement, which is a /48? Do you recommend, advertising multiple /48s, or at least just working with the maybe a mid aggregation size? Say if you have a /32, you stick to advertising maybe /36s or something like that. But what are your thoughts on the growth of the routing table, not just from v4, but also with v6 in parallel?
Thanks for that question, Brent. Actually, it's very, very interesting. I will try to mix the previous question with this one, because somehow you are telling that, what are my thoughts? You're asking what are my thoughts about announcing several small IPv6 prefixes to a routing table. If you join this question with the previous one, why the people, traditionally speaking, split, they subnet the network and they announce smaller networks to the internet. The reason most of the time is because of traffic engineering. Suppose you have a very big bandwidth against one ISP and you have a smaller bandwidth to another against another ISP, you're going to announce probably the biggest network through your ISP with the biggest bandwidth. So having said that, if you are completely right, suppose you are an ISP and you have an /32, in technically speaking, you are able to announce up to a /48 prefixes to internet, which means over 65,000 prefixes, and that is a lot. And I am going to tell you something that I have previously said in a couple of meetings, in mailing list. If you ask me, I am worried about that case. There is, suppose everybody in the US with an autonomous system, and they start to announce a /48 to internet, there is no router that can support that. It is fully impossible. So I am very worried. And my suggestion, and a LACNIC suggestion, is also to announce aggregate as much as possible to the internet. Suppose you are assigning a /32, probably only announce, and you want to do some traffic engineering, probably you can announce only 2 /33 to the internet. So having said that, we need, all of us need to be worried about these situations. If everybody starts to fully deaggregate their space, internet is going to crash.
So thank you very much, Alejandro.
I guess I'll sure, go ahead, Alejandro.
Something very, very short. It is very common, not everybody do that, so I am recommending this to you. There is a very easy command in every major vendor, I mean that uses BGP, where you can limit how many prefixes you are going to receive from a customer or from a BGP session. So suppose you have a customer who has a /32, you can easily say, I only want to receive up to 10 prefixes from this or in this BGP session, and that's it. Every time suppose your customer starts to announce more than 10 prefixes, it will reset the BGP session.
All right, thanks, Alejandro. So, question related to this, I guess the granularity of the advertising and what I'd asked a little bit earlier about the internet exchange providers is, if we have multiple IP address allocations that are being used at different exchanges, let's say in completely different countries and so on, what would be the recommended way to handle the advertising of those from my ASN?
Okay, yep, me. Well, can you repeat the question? I am not fully sure if you meant the same prefix or the same autonomous systems.
Same autonomous system, but different prefixes in different exchange points.
Same autonomous system.
Or is that?
That is going to work.
Okay.
That is going to work.
My thought when you ask that is one ASN, one prefix. Ideally, each AS number has its one prefix. All right, you can't have a one prefix for 3 ASNs, right? It's not possible. But to the extent you can, you want to have each ASN has as close to one prefix as possible. I think that's my thoughts.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. I mean, it's good that we can trash out some of these things here, because we do have not in many cases, currently inside of the region, the organizations who we would see at multiple exchange points it's Flow and Digicel, right? I mean, maybe there are a couple more who would be at a multiple, but then also Akamai and Cloudflare, who are doing peering there as well. What we don't have as many of are smaller independent organizations and operators. But no, that's a discussion that has been going on in the CaribNOG space. I want to be in Grenada and I want to be in St. Kitts, right? I guess the question I'm kind of teasing out is, what does that small independent operator do when they go to get their resources from the RIR? Do I go and get 2 different ASNs, one that I'm going to use in Grenada and pair there, a second one in St. Kitts? Or do I just go then, well, 2 ASNs and 2 different IP allocations? Or do I get 1 ASN and 1 IP allocation and in my network split it and pair? I guess that's really the core scenario that I'm trying to get answered.
Can I add a quick thought?
Yeah, sure.
So we've talked about what about v6 routing? What about the routing table exploding? If that's the case, if that's our problem, that's a good problem to have. In the sense of, if we're using v6 so ubiquitously, if there's so much v6 that a routing table is enormous, that shows people are using it. So it's a problem, but the bigger problem is getting people to use it in the first place. So I think it's a good problem to have. It is a problem, but it's a problem of success. And
Okay.
so I would say it's in that sense, it's a good problem to have.
So maybe you're erring on the side. If I hear it correctly, you might be erring on the side. Go and get your 2 different ASNs and your 2 different.
Yeah, I think, look, let's get everybody using v6,
right.
And then we can hash out the routing table issues. That's a good problem to have, and it certainly is a problem. But
Fair enough.
let's celebrate that people would be using v6. That's a
Right.
win.
Yeah. Okay.
I like that thinking.
in the software development world, talk about don't optimize too early, right? Let's get the functionality out there, and then you can clean it up after. All right, great. We're about at the top of the hour before we switch over mode into a more informal lunch with the speakers. So just want to give a last call for and pause for any last call for questions for our speakers inside of the formal webinar portion, because shortly we will be breaking for lunch for a more informal Q&A.
Brent McIntosh, Grenada Internet Exchange. Just a short question, and maybe we can carry this one into lunch for discussion. I have worked in the past at a couple of ISPs, and one of the ISPs, we ensure that a single AS was used per country. We still have a very large legacy service provider that has been trying to move away from using a single AS in multiple islands, and they have been doing a great job at it, but there's still quite a few of the smaller islands that is sharing same AS. Would ARIN, say LACNIC, sort of consider, and maybe it doesn't have to be in policy, but looking at how you can try to encourage these ISPs to sort of fast track their changes from using this this legacy way of advertising the networks. And the reason I'm asking is because I get tons of calls from customers and and regulators asking why is my prefix in BVI showing up as a St. Vincent IP address. So maybe it's an interesting discussion, but if we have the time and time permits, we can probably just take a little deep dive into it.
That's great, Brent, and this gives us a great opportunity. I'm going to ask John and Alejandro not to answer that right now, because we're at the top of the hour. So we're going to leave everybody on a cliffhanger, and invite you to come back in a few minutes for our lunch with the speakers, in which John and Alejandro will answer this, and we'll be able to have a more informal talk. So want to thank all of our attendees and panelists for a really great session today, looking at autonomy, resiliency through autonomous system numbers and IPv6 deployment. We will actually continue this this session next week. and we'll follow up on a part 2 with this to cover some more details. So as we switch over to lunch, Claire, any last?
Yeah, just want to put a plug in here. Next week, we're adding a second part to this webinar session. So the first part, we deal with all the technical issues of COVID-19 and the Caribbean. But next week, we also want to add a session after where we're going to be talking about how is this actually affecting the normal citizen out there, the persons who are working from home, the students, the parents, the internet governance people. So we really want to, we're pitching it to a wider audience. We do want our CaribNOGers to be here, but we also want persons who are grappling with the issues of how do I protect my home network? How do I stay safe at home during this pandemic? So we're going to be looking at that. Look out for promos and do make arrangements to come out and be part of that webinar. Thanks much.
All right. Thank you, Claire, and thanks again, everyone, and welcome everybody to stay with us for the next half an hour. We will promote everyone to be panelists so that we can have a more free-flowing discussion. Thanks. All right, great. So welcome back. This is our informal, less formal part of our interaction today. We wanted to continue some of the questions, but also just widen it and just use the opportunity to draw upon our speakers' knowledge in this and related areas. So welcome you to have lunch with us. Those of you who have lunch nearby, feel free to grab it and bring it over. I think we have veggie burgers and all kind of stuff being trotted out. Thanks to Albert. Oh wow, ribs.
Wow.
That's how we roll.
The vegetarians are asking questions.
That's what the fries are for.
Okay, right, potatoes. Great. So gonna ask Alejandro and John if we can kind of start off with what Brent had posed. And Brent, actually, if you can just succinctly restate your question for those who might not have caught it the first time around, and then we'll get that rolling.
Thanks, Stephen. Again, Brent McIntosh, the Grenada Internet Exchange. So my question to both John and Alejandro was related to a sort of an enforcement to ensuring that ISPs who operate in this region sort of stick to using the best practice of having a single distinct ASN per country, per island. We've seen providers in the Caribbean, doing this, the right way by having every island, on a single organization having their own AS per country. One of the larger ISP who is actually doing so now, trying to migrate away from that topology architecture. But it's, of course, these things take time because it's in some cases service impacting. You see in smaller islands in the Caribbean, one ISP would have the same AS number being used for maybe 3, 4, 5 islands. Of course, advertising, separate address blocks, but sometimes you get questions from regulators and customers. Why am I seeing in BVI, why am I seeing a Dominica when you look at geolocation tags? Why am I seeing my block and my IP address as being registered as Dominica and Antigua and not BVI? So I just wanted to know if there's anything that's going to be put in place to try to help ISPs move this forward quickly, or maybe in policy to have them to have it be made mandatory that you use a separate distinct AS per country? So that was pretty much my question. I know there's a cost to it, but there is a larger benefit, a larger long-term benefit for doing this the correct way, based on multi-home strategies.
Well, Brent, your question one more time is interesting, and one more time, there is not a unique way to answer that, because that will depend on the network, on the capacity of the network, and I will explain you why, and what the people want to do, and how complex is the network. For example, in the first one, it depends on what you want to do. Why? When you talk about BGP, and when you have only one autonomous system, it is fully recommended to have links in all your internal network, okay? Why is that? Suppose you have an autonomous system, which is, let's say, Dominica and also in Aruba, to say 2 different islands. If for any reason you receive traffic that was supposed to go to Curacao, to Aruba, and maybe that packet arrives to your network through Dominica, your internal network should be able to redirect that packet to the final destination. Okay, so one more, they need in somehow a full mesh network for it to work. When you talk about different countries, that is very expensive. Anyhow, your point is exactly the opposite, to have different autonomous systems, a different autonomous system, and also different prefixes in different countries. That is fully, it is perfectly well done, that can be done easily, and it has one advantage. And the advantage of that is that it is much simpler to administer that network. When you have only one autonomous system announcing a couple of prefixes, probably just from 1 or 2 locations, that is very easy. However, in the other hand, many big companies do not want to do that, because I said more or less, I talked more or less about that during my presentation. Some people want to have to only be seen using one big autonomous systems. When you do that, you are going to get like a better reputation for many organizations. The CDNs are going to see you like an important entity in the internet ecosystems. They will see a lot of requests from your autonomous systems. They will see a lot of prefixes. They will see a lot of people. And that is actually what the CDN wants to see. I only want to see one autonomous systems reaching me for my content. And after that, I can arrange a lot of, I can start to negotiate and doing business with that autonomous system. And that is something that everybody wants. I want to do business, I want to save money, I want to give a better service to my customers. You mentioned, I believe, something like the best practice for doing that. I am not sure if there is a best practice, or if there is a publication, if there is a document suggesting that approach. Unfortunately, I am not sure. If you know about it, just put that link in the chat. I have seen many recommendations about announcing networks and that kind of things, and unfortunately, I do not know that one. And you also mentioned, sorry for my long answer, also the geolocation cases. And well, I have to tell you, I don't know if ARIN, how much they suffer from this. It is a headache. We receive a lot of geolocation issues every week. Like I have a customer in Colombia, and that customer appears to be in Peru, and from Peru appears to be in Brazil. Of course, you cannot open a page, or a page is going to present the content because the page believes he's in another place. If that is your case, there are many approaches that you can take. Unfortunately, there is not like a magic wand that you can move and your geolocations issues will disappear. You have like to work a lot. You have to write emails to, for example, fill out online forms to Google, to Facebook, to Twitter, to every major content provider, telling them I am here, this is my location. In LACNIC, in our portal, we have a geolocation mechanism that in somehow can try to help you. There are also another things that you can try to do, like DNS geolocation. The DNS, they have a special resource record for these cases where you can specify an IP address in which part of the world it is located, and it can help you. However, one more time, this is not like a magic wand. I can tell you, and I believe it's happening in the Caribbean, satellite links, where you have you only have one spot from one satellite, which probably covers, let's say, 15 islands. You will be having probably the same IP address for all the 15 island surfing internet. So there is no way you can geolocate this address in a fully accurate way. I hope I answered, Brent. If I left something out, just feel free to ask me again. Sorry for my long answer.
No, actually, this was very good, and I understand the points you're making. Because when I review the providers that operate in the Caribbean, some of them do actually have connections from every island to every other island, including their major transit points. So they do operate as full mesh. So I think more so the bigger part of the issue now is actually dealing with the, the geolocation issues. So you gave me some good food for thought, and at least I think I know how to try to work on that side of the issue now. Will be great to hear from John as well on his thoughts.
Yeah. So since we're having lunch, the sort of most famous food item from Virginia is, of course, the Smithfield ham. So I have a picture of a nice honey baked ham here. Mmm, yummy. So that's our food dish. no problem. So Alejandro is exactly right, which is geolocation is just a mess. Once you get into it, it's just so I would say, for that issue, it's a big issue to take on. I think there's a lot of value in it, but it's something I would say that someone like Bevel would be a good person to kind of deputize, for lack of a better term. There's a lot of, it's a big issue, and when you get into it, it could expand enormously. So I think there's value in, we actually have people, we all the time we have people, hey, well, why is this site saying I'm in this location or that location? I think that's something it's part of our mission. It's really something that someone like Bevel can bring to the table and say, this is something that people are interested in. We as an organization might need to look at this because it's not cheap. Geolocation issues, because of, you have so many third parties doing it, there's so much there that I think it's valuable, but it's not to be entered into lightly. It's something that, once you go into it, you can't really do it halfway. So I would say there's a lot of value in it, but I think it's something that ARIN as an organization or any RIR is going to invest time in it, invest money in it, something that really needs to have strong backing. So I think if that's something you're interested in, it really needs to be somebody who has a seat at the table, like Bevel, would be a person who can champion that and say, yes, it's going to take some resources, but it's a wise investment. This is something that will have a big impact. I think that's what it's going to take, is something like that is really to knowing that it really is going to cost. There's a pretty big cost to it, that it's worth it. And so if that's something that you feel the value is there, I think that's what a community saying, this is important to us. That's kind of, because it's big. It's not something you could just do as a one-off, as a cheap kind of low-hanging fruit. It is a big task. But I think it's, to me, quite frankly, 10, 15 years ago when I first started at ARIN, I thought geolocation is a service we should be providing. It seemed like part and parcel of our mission, but it's something that it can expand into an enormous time sink. So I think there's a lot of value, but someone needs to champion it. And that's really what needs to happen, in my view anyway.
This is Claire. Talking about the whole geolocation issue, maybe I may have it wrong, but since this is informal and we, the question that I want to find out. So for instance, like the University of the West Indies, our head office is in Jamaica. If we and we are in there are 5 campus countries now, but there are 13 other countries where there are parts of the university. So my thinking is, if you're going to have ASN numbers in all of these different locations, when you're talking geolocation, are you saying then that maybe the head office, which is in Jamaica, should probably advertise that location as the university location? I'm trying to understand what that whole concept of geolocation means. Because you have locations, the other main locations are Trinidad and Tobago, which is LATNIC, Barbados, which is ARIN, and Antigua, which I think is also ARIN, and as I said, Jamaica. So how do we then, and well, Open Campus, which happens to be in Barbados, but how do we, how does geolocation work in a scenario such as that?
So I think what Brent was getting at, is there a hand up? I'm sorry. Does Albert want to?
Oh, no. Brent.
I was just going to give Claire another example so that perhaps this geolocation issue could be, understood from a different perspective. I remember we were at a CaribNOG in Curacao, and there was a big uproar from the local persons in Curacao because there are persons in Curacao, and Curacao, of course, has relations to Holland. So persons living in Curacao would want to access personal information on births, on deaths, on government information, which would be hosted on servers in Holland. But because in Curacao they were getting IP addresses, for example, from LATNIC, the geolocation was determining that Curacao users were not from Holland, but rather from Latin America. So this posed a problem in terms of them actually being able to access resources which legitimately they should have been able to access in Holland. So Claire, that is one of the scenarios where geolocation, tends to cause a problem for end users.
But Albert, so what should be done then in a situation like that? How should that, because that is a problem. So how can we resolve an issue like that?
So exactly what John says. This is a huge and complex animal. And I think John mentioned Bevel's name about 5 times when he was commenting. Because of all of Bevel's hooks in different areas, it is a huge and complex issue. You can't solve this, like was said, I think, by Alejandro, with a magic bullet. There's no one solution to this. You have to go technical, you have to go political. I mean, you have to speak to stakeholders, to third-party providers, because there are lots of different entities involved in this. No simple solution. Claire, I'm sorry.
No, I'm not thinking that there should be a simple solution, but the good thing about CaribNOG is that we bring so many different stakeholders together. So sitting right here, we do have ARIN and we have LATNIC. And that could be a start, to start the conversation where this can be, it is happening in our region. So what then can be done to start a conversation like this and then move forward? I know, yes, Bevel has his finger in a lot of different pies and can play a significant role in this. But, it's also important for us to say, I'm sitting here, what can I do, rather than, point to somebody else to do something.
Yeah, if I could jump in, I think what Brent's point is that, so if you commingle everything, if you have one ASN, one block of addresses that serves multiple different countries, you make it a little more difficult for third parties to figure out where they're being used. I think what Brent's point was, and Brent can correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you divide up your resources such that ASNs and networks are clearly associated with one area, not multiple, you make it easier for third parties to start to geolocate. In other words, if you can say, this block is not used across 13 different countries or however many, it is used in one, then you make it a little bit easier for people to start identifying. So Claire, I think that's one step, is that you can start saying, look, here's my stuff that's used in Jamaica. Here's what's used in Antigua. People may not pick up on that. And we can sort of can't force the horse to drink the water. We can lead it there, but that's sort of a starting point. So I would say that's, Brent's put in chat, I think, spot on. So that sounds like maybe I've kind of hit on something. I think that's what people can do is sort of, if you can, the first step is saying, I know where my resources are being used. I can tell you this is used in Jamaica, this is used in Antigua, this is used in St. Kitts, whatever. That's a first step, I would say. If you can't do it, how can anybody else do it, right? If you can't tell the world where things are used, it's impossible. So I think a prudent first step would just be to say, I know where everything's used. And if I know that, then I can start telling other people about it. Now, Albert's right. It's a big lift to get there. But, that's a sort of starting point, is just to say, if I know it, now it's possible for me to tell other people about it. I think that's, if you're looking for a prudent first step, that's what occurs to me.
Okay.
Hopefully that makes sense.
It does. It does.
Yes, it does. It does.
It's not going to do it. It's not going to be fixed in a single day. But
Right.
I'll tell you, it is something that end users notice. It's one of the biggest things where we get people saying, "Hey, I can't access Hulu," or "I can't get onto Netflix," or "I'm getting the wrong country," or it's one of, I would say, to me, it's the most visible thing to the average person. I'm trying to get this thing on my phone and it's not working. What's going on? It's something that it's mystical. It's like, it's like the Wizard of Oz. There's a magical man behind a curtain and pulling levers and gears, and who knows what happens. So it is big because it really does impact. That's something people notice, right? Hey, I can't get my TV show on. That's what people notice. Not, your average person doesn't notice sort of esoteric things. They just know, I'm trying to watch this thing and it's not working. So it does have a lot of visibility to the average person, more so than a lot of things we do. A lot of things we do are only noticed by technical people, but these geolocation things, everyone notices, right? And they don't understand. No one understands it, and it's frustrating to them. They will contact us and say, fix it. And we'll say, we can't fix it, and quite frankly, nobody can. There's no central authority that does all this. And it is frustrating for people not to understand. People really they don't like problems, but they especially don't like problems that don't have solutions. When it's just, hey, we don't know. Hey, good luck. So to me, it's something that impacts people directly. That's something I've always felt like it's important because it's something that does touch people's lives. It's not just an esoteric network issue. It's something that impacts people who have no idea what ARIN is and never will. Mm-hmm. My thought.
All right.
I was a quick comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Alejandro.
IPv6 in somehow, because one more time, there is not my magic wand for this, can help to reduce the geolocation problems. And basically, this happened because today, since there are not many IPv4 addresses out there, the people started to borrow, to lease, to buy, to whatever IPv4 address space. And suppose I talk with Stephen Lee. Hey, hello, Stephen. You have a /24 IPv4 blog. Can I borrow it from you? Can you lease it to me or whatever? And I start announcing that blog in Venezuela. What is going to happen there is that the people at the beginning basically will start to see, oh, they want to get something in McDonald's, in Burger King, in Domino's Pizza, at Amazon, and they will believe that the delivery address is in the Caribbean and not here. Since IPv6 address space is so huge, and we have all of us, we have plenty of IPv6 address space, in somehow, if the people deploy IPv6, it will mitigate a little bit this situation.
I think it's absolutely correct because, historically, people came to us to get v4 every 3 months, every year, every 6 months. And you ended up with what's used in Jamaica. Hey, here's a list of 100 prefixes that are being used. So I think to Alejandro's point, with v6, we have an opportunity to say, this is the one block for Jamaica. That's it. There's not a giant list of 100 prefixes you need to look at. Yeah. This is the block for Jamaica, period. Full stop. There's no other block. There never will be. So I think there's an opportunity for that to help a little bit. It's not, there's no magic bullets. These are all sort of incremental steps to get us better than where we are now.
All right.
And by the way, Claire, you are very lucky that you have not suffered geolocation issues.
All right. I think we're gonna wrap up now. We're 25 past, so I think this was good carry-on discussion. You know, just to recap, we looked at the issues of resiliency. Today, we're looking at the use of autonomous systems as a way of giving organizations more independence and control of their networks, and IPv6 as a part of the whole issue of another tool in the kit to make our networks more resilient. John gave us a nice overview of the landscape, and then Alejandro took us into some more details about how we would use these. And our discussion right here in the last half an hour has been interestingly around the issue of I guess the actual deployment of ASNs and IPv4 and v6 resources to create a more better geolocation environment in which we know what resources are being used where, as part of being able to better manage our infrastructure. So this was a really great conversation. Everyone, thank you all for participating. Our meeting recordings, as always, will be posted online on Facebook and on the website. And we're going to continue. If you can bring up the slides for with our conversation next week, part 2 of our autonomous systems and v6 deployment discussion. As Claire mentioned, we will be having a separate segment after a lunch break next week, targeting a wider audience, less focused on the technical details, but more on some of the impact on education and some of the social issues around what we're treating with working from home and security protection for our kids and so on. So thanks everyone. Join us next week at 10 a.m. to 12 for our part 2, and from 1 p.m. our public safety webinar. So have a good weekend, everyone, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Bye, everyone. Nice seeing you all again. Till next week.
A great and safe weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.